What is Wall Street concerned with right now? What are you hearing about from clients? Is there, in fact, concern about global risk around Ukraine? Or did we get through the hard stuff already?
Yeah, I would say, and nice to be with you all. I mean, I would say that for certain clients, Ukraine funding, what's happening in the Middle East, are certainly continue to be a focus. The majority, however, of our clients really have pivoted to the 2024 election, and particularly the horse race between former President Trump and President Biden. Also, actually, some more interest in down-ballot races, just given how crucial the composition of Congress will be to many of the fiscal items that will be on the table come 2025, and has a lot of concern or attention from markets and from Wall Street. So I would say, Joe, they're not. I mean, now that we've averted the shutdown, now that we've raised the debt ceiling, of course, almost a year ago, folks are more focused on the election. One thing I will just say, though, because we've got a lot of clients actually asking about what has happened to the bipartisan tax bill that passed on a massive bipartisan basis in the House, but looks to be sort of slowly dying on the vine in the Senate.
Well, yeah, and Bloomberg actually has a great story that we just put out this afternoon on the idea that it looks like Senate Republicans are, in fact, going to kill that $78 billion bill. And it kind of brings us back to the question Joe asked in a different way, the idea that the spending is done. So what else tangible are we likely to get out of this Congress 7 months out from an election when everyone's focused on the campaign?
Yeah, Kailey, actually, if you look at just market returns in an election year, usually in terms of the risk assets of the S&P 500, usually that performs pretty well when an incumbent president is up for re-election. Is this correlation or causation? I think that's an open question. But I think part of this sort of thesis that markets do well in an election year is because politicians typically like to stimulate in an election year. They usually like to pass some sort of fiscal stimulus. And I think that was why there was so much focus on that tax bill, because even as you talk about it, it was $80 billion or what have you, but a lot of the effects were actually going to be front loaded. So it was about $100 billion estimated impact from a fiscal perspective in 2024, should that have passed. Now, as you mentioned, it looks like that won't pass, that the Senate just can't sort of come to sort of unanimity regarding some of the provisions and what have you. And I do think the sort of lingering question among Republicans is, why would they want to help President Biden in an election cycle? That's been sort of our view for a while, that odds were actually lower than what people thought, just because of that that sort of political truism that the opposing party doesn't want to help the president seeking re-election. So I think bottom line, though, here is that now that we have spending in the rearview mirror, probably no new fiscal stimulus coming on board in 2024. And as a result, I think many investors are just already pivoting to 2025.
Well, with that in mind, it's already campaign season. We talked to Congresswoman Susan DelBene, who chairs the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. This is her job, to get Democrats elected to the House. She talked to us on the program yesterday specifically about some of the swing districts she's focused on. Here's what she said.
I've been all across the country to swing districts all across the country. And, you talk to folks and these are purple districts. These are places where you have independents, probably folks who are former Republicans who don't know what happened to their party, and others who want to see folks who are going to go to Washington, D.C. to govern, who are going to find solutions to the issues facing our country and help move us forward.
Libby Cantrill, let's look into your crystal ball, because I had a peek at your note to clients that made reference to these races and the balance of power in the House and Senate come November. I think you see the Senate flipping. How about the House?
Yeah, we do see that the odds are pretty high that the Senate flips, Joe, just because, as you know, the Senate map, if you will, is pretty bad for Democrats, defending 23 of the 34 open seats. And of those 23, many are in either red or very purplish states. So it looks difficult for them, not impossible for sure, but looks difficult for them to hold on to the Senate. The House, though, is a different ball of wax. Of course, it's more of a national election. All 435 members of the House are going to be up for re-election. And as we all know, as you've been talking about, sort of ad nauseum, I think at this point, is that there's a very narrow majority that Republicans have. So going into the election with just a very slim majority, meaning that Democrats actually do have a shot. I mean, there are, I think, I would say some tailwinds for Democrats. There's some headwinds for them as well. One tailwind has been the strong fundraising that we've seen out of some of sort of the Democratic groups in terms of the House. Redistricting, a bit of a wash, but maybe benefits Democrats just a little bit. But I think, that the bottom line here, Joe, what we're telling clients is that kind of regardless of which party controls which chamber, neither party is going to have a commanding majority. And that really, as you know, makes a big difference in terms of being able to get really big partisan pieces of legislation through the House and the Senate. So we're guiding clients that we actually might just see whatever composition of Congress come 2025, they may just address the Trump tax cuts, and that's it, just because they don't really have really effective governing majorities. But again, still a lot can change. It's only April, only seven months until the election. So don't want to be too high conviction on any of these calls, but that's sort of the state of play at this point.
Well, when we think about these down ballot races, and this is a question we've been asking a lot, Libby, is we know that the presidential contest may really come down to turnout, to voters being mobilized and willing to go cast a ballot for these two highly unpopular candidates. But if they don't turn out, that affects everyone else on that ballot as well. How do you think about that dynamic? And could it actually be some of these congressional races that drive turnout more so than the presidential race?
I mean, it's a great question. It's a great point. I think it's, not only could it be some of these down ballot races, it could also just be some of these other issues that may be in the on the ballot. As we all know, that the presidential election will likely be close again if past this prologue, and just given kind of where polling is right now, it will probably come down to the same 6 swing states that it came down to in 2020. And as a result, sort of the down ballot races in those particular states, as you said, could drive turnout. But also, if there are other issues on those ballots, particularly in Nevada and Arizona, where there will be sort of a de facto abortion rights ballot on issue on the ballot. And we do think that could actually help to drive, turnout both ways, honestly. I think this is the hard thing in terms of prognosticating. As you guys know, it's difficult to know sort of which way these issues may drive turnout and who it will actually, who it will help. Usually low turnout helps Republicans, at least in the past. But, the last few elections have sort of changed that dynamic for sure.